Hello and welcome to Math Lessons with Linda. Today's topic is factoring by grouping. And here's what the problem looks like. X to the third minus 6x squared minus 25x plus 150. One of the ways that you can determine a problem needs to be factored by grouping is that you'll see 4 terms rather than 2 or 3 terms, as in previous types of factoring that we've done. And grouping means exactly what it sounds like. We're going to take the 4 terms and group them into pairs. Most of the time, you're going to group them in the order that they come in. Not all the time, so you should make sure that as you go through the problem, it makes sense to group the terms this way. So for our problem, I've grouped the first 2 and the last 2. And what we're going to do after we've grouped them together is for each pair, we're going to look for the GCF. So the greatest common factor between these 2 terms is an x squared. So I'll factor out an x squared, and then what I have left is an x for the first term, keep my minus sign, and then a 6 for the second term. So I finished this part of the problem. I'm going to do the same thing with these 2 terms. So when I notice I have a subtraction sign that starts the second set of terms, I'm going to factor out the negative as part of the GCF. So right away, I'm going to factor out a minus, and then I'm going to look at my numbers and my variables. And for this problem, I can factor out a 25 from each of these terms. When I factor out the negative, what that's going to do with everything that's left over is it's going to change the sign. So this term right here with the 25x was originally a negative, so now it's going to be a positive, and what's left is the x. On this term, it was originally a positive, but I factored out a negative, so that means now I have a negative. And when I factor out 25, what I have left is a 6. Now, what you should notice at this point is that what you have left in the parentheses for each of these groups needs to be the same thing. That's really important. So I've got 2 big groups now, right? These terms and these terms. I'm going to do the same thing and use a GCF. So now the GCF is easy to pick out. It's this same factor that I have that's in the parentheses. So I'm going to factor out an x minus 6 from each of these big bracketed products. And then my last step is to see what's left over. Well, in this one, it's the x squared. And in this one, it's that 25. So I'm going to have the minus sign sticks with it. Okay. So now I factored with grouping, but this one is a special case because if you notice from previous factoring videos, we've talked about what to do when you see a dots, a difference of 2 squares. So I'm going to wrap this up by leaving my x minus 6, which I cannot do anything further with, but I have an x squared minus 25, and the dots pattern says that I take the square root of the first term, the square root of the last term, and I make one of them plus and one of them minus. So this factoring by grouping, I end up with 3 different parentheses, which is x minus 6, x plus 5, and x minus 5. And that's an example of how you factor by using grouping.